Okay, we're going to begin. Welcome everyone to Partners on the Ground. I am thrilled to be your moderator. My name is Susan Julian, and I'm a co-founder of ACF and an advisory board member. I also have the honor of serving as ACF's first executive director, directing its early mission and strategy and creating its first chapters. In those early days, hosting a national conference was merely a dream. So you can imagine how proud I am of ACF today, of our incredible leadership, and how grateful I am to all of you for your initiative and activism and for taking time out of your day to join us. Thank you for being a part of ACF. We have a very special program for you today with among the finest and most hardworking and most talented professional leaders in our community and in our movement. They are Jacob Baum, CEO of Israel on Campus Coalition, Tina Malka, Director of Anti-Semitism Education and Associate Director of the Israel Action Program at Hillel International, Rena Nasser First, Executive Director of Campus Affairs at Stand With Us, and Sophia Witt, Executive Vice President of Students Supporting Israel. Establishing and cultivating partnerships has always been essential to ACF's mission and growth. We are stronger when we work together, when we cooperate and coordinate our missions. So thank you to our panelists for being here. It really means a lot. I'm going to ask a series of questions of our panelists and give them the opportunity to respond. If anyone in the audience has a question they'd like to ask in general or of any individual speaker, please go to the Q&A tab in the panel on your right to submit your question in writing. I will get to the question. There is one question from last session, which I will ask at the end, but please put your questions in so that this way I know how many we have. And I won't break in unless it seems really essential to do that. So without further delay, I'm going to ask our panelists the first question, which focuses on the impact of the pandemic on our respective organizations. Tina, how about you start us off this session? How has your organization adapted to the unique challenges brought on by the pandemic to support students in combating anti-Semitism?
First of all, I want to thank ACF for inviting me. I'm really honored to be here and especially honored to be with all of my colleagues here that I work with so closely. I mean, the pandemic threw a wrench in everything for everyone, right? And so we all had to, and Hillel had to pivot really very quickly into an online platform. So one of the things that we did, we had Hillel at Home. And so we had amazing speakers and educational programs for students to join and be on when that was the only choice they have. As things are becoming a little more hybrid right now, we have things online, we have things in person. But I mean, you know, Hillel is never closed during the pandemic. We were always open, whether it was programming that was distance learning or whether it was just making sure that students had Shabbat dinners that they picked up and then took back to their homes. Hillel never closed. One of the things we've always been involved in is making sure that we're empowering Jewish students to fully express who they are, their full identity and complete selves, their Jewish values, their identity, and their love of Israel. And that the pandemic did not change that. You know, we're all really about making sure that students can be themselves. And so through education, particularly around anti-Semitism, Hillel International developed an anti-Semitism curriculum that we're rolling out currently across campuses in the United States to really give students the historical context and meaning behind anti-Semitism and being able to make sure that they feel comfortable expressing their own lived experience and their narratives of what anti-Semitism feels like to them, both to each other, to the non-Jewish student community, and also to administrators when they have that opportunity to express those things.
Thank you very much, Tina. What about you, Sophia?
Yeah, thank you, Susan, for having me as well. And to my fellow panelists, thank you so much. Glad to be with you guys on here virtually. I agree with Tina. I mean, it did throw a wrench into everything, having kind of a shift to completely online for a while. I know at Students Supporting Israel, we were already primarily online from a national standpoint, but because we are student-led, our students had kind of a hard time adapting because, I mean, who could have predicted that we would be completely online? So a lot of our students had different struggles. We go on a campus-to-campus basis, so certain campuses had a harder time navigating being online, whereas some campuses were much easier online. And we did have a lot of anti-Semitism coming forth during the pandemic. And so some areas hotter than others. So we had certain campuses in, California that were doing virtual tabling, or we had some campuses that were on the East Coast doing fundraising. We had different, for like Save a Child's Heart, different, initiatives that they felt personally that they could tackle from an online standpoint. And from a national perspective, we really wanted to make sure that we provided training to our students for this great wave of anti-Semitism that we predicted was going to happen regardless of, if we were on campus or online. Anti-Semitism seems to rise every year, and that was just perfect proof of the pandemic. And, we held a lot of training sessions. We held a lot of collaborative events with our fellow partners. And then we held a conference for passing the Ihra definition of anti-Semitism through student governments. And we were successful in doing that on 13 campuses over the course of being completely online. We're still in the process of doing that currently. And we partnered with, 50 of our pro-Israel and Zionist organizations across the board. And we were able to host this conference to offer to students resources and materials so that they could be online and still be very proactive and take an action that, maybe wasn't an equal opportunity when they were on the ground, or would have been shut down by these anti-Israel groups had they proposed them physically in person. So I think that the online opportunity almost opened some doors for certain campuses to be able to do something on a very discrete level. So yes, the pandemic was very difficult to transition to, but it opened a lot of opportunities, and it also kind of opened our eyes to certain instances that we might not have had we been in person. So
how interesting. And Rena, I'm going to ask you to go next, but I just have a question about what you're saying, Sophia, just something that comes to mind. Did you find that there were, and maybe the question is for you too, Rena, since it's a similar population, did you find that there were a lot of students that were not necessarily active that became active because it was, the physicality of standing up in person on campus is scarier than standing up digitally somehow? Maybe.
Yeah, you know what? I would actually have to, yeah, I think that the pandemic really brought out some people who feel more empowered online, or feel a little bit like they have a little bit more cushion with being online, where maybe they're not confrontational in the sense that they can't have SJP in their face screaming at them, but they are willing to use their words to propose these legislations that get passed in student government and make an impact on campus. And I can only speak for my organization, but we had several students who were like, I want to start an SSI chapter throughout the course of the pandemic, simply because it was kind of an open door for them. And they saw these legislations passing and said, I can do that. And strangely enough, we had a lot of community colleges coming to us to do this, and students who maybe weren't on giant campuses that were like, hey, this is something that I can do, or this is like an easy way for me to be very involved and have a huge impact in the greater world of my campus, and really leave my campus with something bigger than me. So that was just my experience. I'm sure Rena has one as well.
And also you Rena, you have all your Emerson fellows, right? So I'm curious to see how. So tell us about the pandemic from Stand With Us's perspective.
Sure. As an organization, we're grateful enough to have been well suited for the shift to completely online. We have robust social media platforms. We were publishing weekly webinars or conversations with experts in the field through Stand With Us TV, and all of our booklets, big educational resources for students on campus especially, were available online in PDF form. Beyond that, we were also offering virtual workshops, presentations, a robust hands-on guidance in response to incidents on campus. What's really interesting in talking about how students have been responding to the change from the pandemic, I would say for many, it made it a lot easier to practice everyday leadership. It made it a lot easier for them to get involved with something, to be an activist in their own way. If it was sharing something online, if it was attending a virtual program, commenting on something on social media, I think students in general feel that with everything being online, it certainly is easier to be more active. And what we're really seeing as we transition to being back in person is that passion, that commitment, that desire to take that first step is actually translating into in person too. It's a feeling that's staying with a lot of these students, which is really, really great. In general, students are looking for community. They're looking to know that they're not alone in this space. They're not alone in this movement. They're not alone on campus. And Stand With Us, along with all of my colleagues here, have put in a ton of resources, time, and energy to make sure that students don't feel that way, to know that they have their community on campus, and they also have this larger network of leaders from all these organizations that are eager to welcome them and connect with them. And I think that's probably been the most rewarding part of this work, is seeing that online community flourish. And our Emerson Fellows, who are present all around the world, North America, the UK, Brazil, soon other countries as well, really took it upon themselves to stay connected. If anything, we facilitated it, but they took it upon themselves completely in the most exciting and rewarding of ways.
What about you, Jacob? What have you seen in terms of the pandemic with your organizations?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me, Susan. And I'm very proud of everything you've accomplished. Like Roz, you kind of created Alums for Campus Fairness with a couple of your friends in your living room, in the equivalent of Roz's living room. And it's amazing what it's become today. Such an important, vital.
It was technically the kitchen. It was around my kitchen.
It was even better. Even better. Well, you cooked up something amazing. And so it's really special to see.
By the way, with lots of Jewish treats and whatnot. And cakes.
I love it. Well, I'm really proud of what it's become, and I know you are, Susan. And we do a lot of work together on a regular basis, and it's an honor to be here with my colleagues. I'll just try to quickly say that I think that the meaning of where we are today is that we are now fully in a digital first world. Digital first. All of the data, all of the research out there shows that that's how everyone is interacting with each other. That's how everyone is consuming information. By the way, across demographics, it's not only a campus situation. And one of the features of being alive today is not only that things are changing so quickly, but I think it's really important for us to recognize that the pace of change has accelerated. And in some ways, it continues to accelerate. Things change in an instant. And so, ICC today is a convener. We have our whole coalition. Every one of the organizations here is a deep part of our coalition. We are an operator in the sense that we bring professional political tools to the field that we deploy, in cooperation with our partners. And we're also a funder. We fund, I think, most of the organizations that are, represented on this panel. I think all of them, including ACF, including Stand With Us. And one of the important pieces is that when we provide funding, it's unrestricted, because you have to, in this world that's changing so quickly, that's so dynamic, so rapidly sort of spinning around, you have to invest in people and in leaders and in organizations like the ones on this panel who kind of know what they're doing, and you have to trust them and you have to invest in them in order to get the job done. You can't all of a sudden ask for a new grant proposal and a 5-year plan with specific metrics and specific benchmarks. And the people out there that want to say, well, I can't give you general operating support. I need a specific project. I need a specific, initiative. I think that's a failure of imagination. I think that's a misunderstanding of where we are today in this world. Things are moving way, way too quickly for that. So that's one of the pieces that I think we have to come to terms with as a Jewish community, and in partnership between the organizations that are operating and on the ground and doing the work versus the funders who kind of need to make sure they're in sync with that reality.
Thank you, Jacob. I want to share with you, and I believe this is factual from my sort of my memory repository. I think ICC was our very first donation outside of just Lori, Mark, and I kind of popping in some savings to get to incorporate and get us started. So thank you. I'm pretty sure that's true, that you were.
I remember that.
Donation.
No, and I remember you were talking with Roz at the time, and I was like, that's great.
So, that you were very, very instrumental in giving us a boost when it was before Stand With Us. It was way before. It was huge for us to get that boost. So I think it's really important, to align the donors and I also want to say, in terms of just what all the panelists have said about the students. I mean, that's, as alumni, that's what we want to do. We want to support and cooperate and interact, not overbear. Right? I learned about that over the last several years. Let the students sort of lead the way, but be there to support them as well. So, okay. So, second question. So, to what extent is anti-Israel activity and anti-Semitism increasing on campus? And what factors do you think are contributing to this trend? Now, before I ask, Jacob, why don't you start us off in one moment? We did have a question from last session, and I was wondering where the question came from, because I hadn't heard the word anti-Israel, but it is in the question. And the question that was asked at the time was, the difference between saying anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist. So, in addition to just talking about what you see in terms of increases and why, maybe you could sort of give that flavor of your organization, how you see those terms being used sort of interchangeably, but maybe it's really not, the same thing. So go ahead, Jacob, you start us off.
Sure. Well, I think part of it, Susan, I don't know that there's been a deliberate decision by our coalition and by the National Pro-Israel campus focus groups to say, we're not going to talk about Zionism. I will say that I've seen some opinion polling, some really solid, firmly grounded in reality, large national samples, opinion polling that says that talking about Israel instead of Zionism just attracts more support. So perhaps there's a tactical question. I think that may be part of it, although I will say that there are a number of organizations in our coalition that have been making a really deliberate effort to say we're gonna reclaim Zionism. But one of the challenges I think we have on that front is that what our adversaries have been doing for years and are doing today with greater success than ever before is that they are arguing that Jews are powerful, privileged white people who are using their power and their privilege and their money and their resources to silence anti-Israel activists or Palestinian human rights activists. And so one of the challenges is, how do we make our struggle as an oppressed minority in the United States similar to those of the struggles of other oppressed minorities, and kind of flip that a little bit. So when you see what's happening on many of the campuses, there is a need to stand up and say, Jewish students deserve to have their civil rights protected, just like other minority groups do. And for the people out there, like the Jewish Voice for Pieces of the world and the If Not Nows of the world, it's easy for them to say, well, we're Jewish, but we're not Zionists. We're Jewish and we're anti-Zionist. Judaism, on the one hand, is a religion, they say, and Zionism is a racist political position, on the other hand. Well, it falls a little flat because just because plenty of Jews don't observe Shabbat, just because plenty of Jews don't keep kosher, doesn't mean that Shabbat and kashrut are not fundamental components of Jewish identity. And it's absolutely the same for Israel. And so there's an element here that I think our whole coalition has been working to advance about saying the moment at which a Jewish student, whether it's at Duke, whether it's at University of Connecticut, as someone wrote in the chat, I saw Susan, whether it's at Princeton, at the moment at which a Jewish student feels that she has to shed the Zionist component of her Jewish identity in order to feel accepted and safe on campus, that is a civil rights violation. It is morally wrong, and it's probably illegal as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jacob. What about you, Rena? Go ahead. Give us your thoughts on that.
I would say, you know, in my career, my professional career in this field, I've certainly entered this space as a professional, seeing the line between anti-Semitic activity on campus and anti-Israel activity on campus. I've seen that line blurred oftentimes, but I've also seen it carefully towed, especially in students feeling very comfortable and saying, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm just anti-Zionist. I just don't, you know, that's my position, and it doesn't make me a horrible person. It makes, if anything, it makes me a better person. What's interesting over the last few years, especially as school has shifted to purely remote learning, that there's really no line altogether at this point. We're seeing incidents that are clearly showing that that line has been thrown out the door. Some examples that I cited previously were like the posts on anonymous platforms about Jewish fraternities, like at Indiana or USF, individual students being accused of Islamophobia and being harassed and even doxxed, like at University of Connecticut, Zoom bombings, debates about kosher food on campus, only because the vendor is pro-Israel. I mean, there's some pretty problematic things we're seeing, and as Jacob referenced earlier, they don't need to be in person to still happen. If anything, it feels like the gusto behind them is even stronger. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that people are more bold behind a screen. I think all of our organizations can confirm that anti-Semitism has certainly proliferated online in a unique way. And it's almost like a virus, especially after the tremendous uptick in anti-Semitism and misinformation in light of the Israel-Hamas conflict in May. So in general, we're seeing a lot happen. But what to me is the most concerning thing for us to discuss as a group is the lack of consequences for these actions or for the perpetrators on campus. If they're not receiving academic consequences for the things that they're doing, then these detractors, these perpetrators, are not going to feel any less inclined to stop. All of our organizations collectively and individually feel very strongly about making sure that administrations, the Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, president of the school, all these different key stakeholders in this university, in this institution, are taking these issues seriously and that they are taking appropriate action. I know that that is a huge proponent of the Stand With Us legal department, as Yael shared earlier, to make sure that if things are happening on campus, that the proper steps are being taken to make sure that Jewish and pro-Israel students feel valued, heard, and protected just as any other group deserves on campus.
Tina, why do you feel that anti-Semitism has been increasing during this period of time recently? What is your experience?
Well, I don't see anti-Semitism as something that's gone away, first of all. I think that the virulence of it, I mean, a lot of the hatred of Jews, conspiracy theories of Jews, is something that has always existed, and that hasn't gone away. I think it has sort of come out from under a rock in a more serious way because we're all online. But I think that it's the anti-Semitism is related to anti-Israel. that really is what we're seeing the most, because there's anti-Semitism that is related to classic anti-Semitism, just the hatred of Jews, right? And there's anti-Semitism that is related to Israel. And, for each student on this call and for all of us, that's sort of a Venn diagram where those things cross over when it comes to how people, what that impact is of that anti-Semitism on them. But I also want to speak to something Jacob talked about, is that the Jewish community is really diverse. And I think the narrative out there is that what's diverse is that we're white. Am I white and privileged? You bet. Are all Jews? No. You have Ashkenazi Jews, Sephardic Jews, Mizrahi Jews, B'nai Israel, Beta Israel Jews. You have Jews all over the world. We represent where Judaism is not just a religion, it's an ethnic religion. We have a multitude of cultures out there. And a lot of that is for all of these students, and we always encourage all the students to really talk about who they are, what my background is, and all the different places we come from, and the languages we speak, and the different traditions we have from the different Jewish backgrounds that we have, is something that most people don't know. So it is about also getting out there and telling our story of who we are. But when it comes to responding and making sure that story is heard, that is the work of people like Mark Rutenberg and Rebecca Russo from the Campus Climate Initiative, my colleagues at Hillel International, that work with the administration to make sure that administrators understand what anti-Semitism is and how that relates to anti-Israel behavior on campus. When we have these virulent campaigns, whether it's BDS, whether it's just opposing hummus on campus or opposing the definition of anti-Semitism on campus, it is also about making them aware of who the Jewish community is and what our experience is and what the students' lived experience is with anti-Semitism.
Thank you. Sophia, I've lost track. Did you answer this question?
No, not yet.
So here's something. So you have actually a question from a viewer, and so why don't you take this instead, and then we're going to move to the collaborative question, because that was very powerful last time. So just to give me your perspective. The question is, please describe your experience getting universities to endorse the IHRA definition so we may replicate this at our respective universities, colleges. So how would you answer that viewer's question?
Yeah, sure. So one thing is, as I mentioned before, the Ihra definition is kind of a one-size-fits-all definition. It's not, it's not a subjective type of definition where, one campus can't pass it and another campus can pass it. To pass an Ihra definition is not something that, can be adapted. So when you are passing this definition through a university, it's imperative to include all of the examples of the Ihra definition and not to dismantle it and create this new definition of what the Ihra definition is, or to paraphrase the definition in any way. So I want to get that out there, because I think that it's very important that the Ihra definition is accepted in its entirety and not into the structure that the campus wants it to be, or that the administration feels comfortable with passing, because anti-Semitism shouldn't be something that's comfortable. I don't think that anti-Semitism is something that should be negotiated in any way. It's not something that we can sit here and debate what is and what is not anti-Semitic. What is anti-Semitic is anti-Semitic, and it's not something that we're going to decide what can be labeled and what cannot be labeled as an outside group. Just as we wouldn't tell somebody who was a minority, what is racism towards you? This is your racism. This can't be your racism. So in order for us to pass something as serious as the Ihra definition, it needs to be in its entirety. And it needs to be done in language that fits the campus, but doesn't take away from the definition in any way, shape, or form. So whether that looks like passing an anti-oppression glossary on a campus and deciding to identify different oppressive natures and different oppressive structures in society, but still including the Ihra definition for the Jewish people. That's important, so that you're laying out all different types of discrimination that other minorities might feel, but still highlighting what Jews feel as discriminatory. That might also look like a simple anti-Semitism definitive legislation that just talks about anti-Semitism. So the way to do it is contingent on the campus. It's really, it really depends on your campus's climate, your student government. Some student governments are more Zionist than others. And some of them are completely anti-Zionist. And so it's really important that we know the climate before passing something. And if you go on our website, student supporting SSImovement.org, you'll see our actual past legislations where you can kind of look at the previous ones that have passed and find one that might fit the best. And in addition to that, maybe there's something that you feel is necessary to add. I know that a lot of our students like to add specific instances of anti-Semitism that they've experienced on their campus that are relevant to why this definition needs to be passed. And a lot of times administration will dismiss this or not see it as important. And other times we'll find some administrations that say, you know what, I really liked that this was adopted by the student government. We're going to adopt this at an administration level. We saw this at Pace University most recently, where they passed it through student government, and the administration said, you know, how can we have some involvement in this? How can we better train our administration to be more sympathetic towards Jewish students, towards Jewish people in general? So again, it's on a campus to campus basis, but the administration is secondary usually to the student government. So in order to get both of them to pass, sometimes there needs to be a couple proposals, but in general, the importance of the Ihra definition is that it's accepted in its entirety and not paraphrased and not cut short and not just listed as we accept this part of the Ihra definition that, you know, it means to be discriminatory towards Jews. The examples are important because the examples are kind of like what all of my panelists here were saying, in that, you know, Zionism is inherent to Judaism, is inherent to our identity. And to take out one part is to kind of tell somebody, you know, you can be part of our community. We will accept you as long as you take off your kippah, as long as you stop going to services, as long as you stop. There are different elements of Judaism that maybe we don't all observe, but that are inherent to us. So yeah,
I think that's wonderful. And what I would, to the person that asked the question, who's an alumni, so there's an opportunity for that person to do some great work on their campus.
absolutely.
And I would recommend that they reach out to Avi, to you, Sophia. Let's do it.
All of us, to all
Right?
of us. You can reach out
Right.
to us as a collective
all
group.
of us. But I'm just focusing on, you know, the question was directed to you. So
Absolutely.
awesome. So I do want to get to collaboration, because sometimes the perspective is that we're not collaborating. You know, we do, you know, compete for donors. I mean, there's stuff that goes on behind the scenes, but I want you to talk, each of you to talk very briefly about, you know, what collaboration means and how we can collaborate, how we can improve the interactions between our organizations. So Tina, why don't you take it away, and then Rena, and then we'll close out with Sophia and Jacob. So go ahead.
You know, it is sort of trite to say that it takes a village, but we know it does, right? We know that students need support in so many different ways, and each of our organizations have unique ways of supporting students. When there is a BDS campaign on campus, it literally takes all of us to help support the students. We have lots of examples. I mean, you know, we have examples at Duke, at Tufts, at, you know, in Illinois, at Florida State, where I know I'm on the phone with Destiny at the ICC, or I'm on the phone with Reno, I'm on the phone with someone at SSI, or working with the students who belong to those organizations, because at SSI, it's the students I work with on campus, you know, at Santa Barbara, at UCSB. And so, you know, we all work together really collaboratively. And I think it's important for the students to understand that we're here for them. We do our work and we exist to serve them and to make sure that they feel safe and secure on campus. That's our primary job. And so however it is that we can do that better or understand their needs better is what we are happy to do.
And Rita, what about students?
To say that our organizations collaborate pretty often is an understatement. I mean, it could be proactive strategy, incredible educational campaigns. It could be reacting to an incident. Either way, all of the professionals, all the organizations within this panel, including ACF, are active and equal parts of the conversations we have and the collaborations and partnerships we embark on when it comes to supporting students. The only thing I would add is that right now we're really at a unique juncture in this movement where more students than ever before are vocal. They're tired of being silenced. They want to take a stand and they want to lead the front themselves. And all of our organizations are uniquely suited to let students lead. At Stand With Us specifically, we train and empower students to lead through the Emerson Fellowship. Generally, all of our organizations constantly pool together resources to help build, maintain, and sustain these incredible communities, student-led communities on the campuses we work with. On our end, while we collaborate on many different exciting campaigns like Students for Ihra, which is all about amplifying student voices in relation to Ihra legislation on campus, I'd say most importantly, the way that Stand With Us collaborates is by increasing the number of students that are active in this conversation. Through the Emerson Fellowship and other programs that we have, we are preparing students to be active parts in these conversations, to know not only where they sit, but when to stand. And what's really exciting and rewarding to us at Stand With Us is seeing our Emerson Fellows as active members and leaders of their Hillel chapter, of their SSI chapter, on student government, connecting with their ICC fellow, their ICC counterpart. It's incredible. And the things that students want to see and do, for us to be there in their corner, supporting them every step of the way, is incredibly gratifying. And that's something we get to share individually and also collectively through our collaborations as well.
Yeah. Well, ACF is a perfect example of collaboration in every way, right? From ICC's initial boost and vote of confidence and money in the bank to all the support of Roz and Jerry Rothstein and Stand With Us and our partnership with them that has led to our explosive growth and success in every way. It is truly, an example of what can be accomplished when we all work together for the same for the same goals. So I do think we're being pushed off of it, and I apologize to Sophia and Jacob. What I gather from this conversation is what great shape we're in. I mean, I miss as a lay leader and as an executive director interacting on a professional level with all of you, and it's wonderful to see the work that you're doing. So thank you from ACF for your work, for your help, for your collaboration, and for your friendship. And you're all amazing. So thank you.